Great to see you guys here. This year, next year are pivotal events for the future of the United States. A real quick note, Mike Harmison here, a strong conservative, is running for Indianola School Board. The election September 2011. Mike Harmison right here. Vote for Harmison. All right, we're fortunate here today in Indianola to have a straight-talking conservative with us. This is a guy that has proven executive office experience. He's got the knowledge, the ideas, and the abilities to address the problems facing our great nation. Folks, Governor Tim Pawlenty.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I wish you could have been with us the last few days because my wife Mary was with me. I think you would have enjoyed seeing her if you haven't had a chance to get to know her, but she just had to go back as one of our daughters coming back from Young Life Camp and had to go greet her when she was going to be with us in the future in Iowa, but she can't be on all the trips because we have two teenage daughters at home. And one of them is 18 and the other is 14. One of them drives and they both like boys. And so they need some parental supervision. But I hope you have a chance to meet Mary. She's the love of my life and a big part of our campaign. Our campaign manager, Nick Ayers, is with us, traveling as well. And we're grateful for Nick's leadership. And Sarah Huckabee joined our campaign recently in the last week or two. So some of you may know Sarah. She's been working on the campaign for about a week. And we've got a lot of other wonderful people, and we're grateful for your help. And thank you for running for school board. We need good people to step forward in public service with their compass set and the right values and ideas for our states and for our local school districts and for our country, and we're grateful for your willingness to step forward in public service as well. Well, these warm days remind me of another summer gone by where Mary and I took our kids over to the Wisconsin Riviera, the Wisconsin Dells. Some of you may have been there, but some years ago when the girls were real little, we were there, and we were driving back to Minneapolis in my little Dodge Stratus, Mary and I in the front seat and the girls in the back. And of course, those of you who have been on long car trips with young kids, you know how it goes. About an hour into the trip, they get pretty bored, right? And so the girls are in the back seat and they're throwing juice boxes at each other and elbowing each other in the ribs and pulling each other's hair. And pretty soon the tempers in the car were about matching the temperatures outside. And so I pulled the car over and got into a gas station, got the doors open. I was pumping gas into my car and kind of murmuring about these misbehaving kids and how awful their behavior was and kind of grumbling to myself. And this guy was pumping gas right next to me at the pump right next to me. And he looked at me, looked at my family, and I think he could sense there was some tension in the family. And he looked and our eyes kind of met by the gas pump and he said, "I wish I had 2 kids." I thought, oh, plenty. Sure. Here you have these cherubs, these wonderful gifts from God, and this poor sap, he doesn't have any of this. And so I turned to him and I said, well, I'm sorry, sir, you don't have kids? He said, no, I got 5 kids. I wish I had 2 kids. Well, that's just a little story about putting things in context, which is what I want to do with you this morning and spend the bulk of the time in questions and answers. But I want to share with you a few perspectives about our great country and about my race for president. And I'm running for president of the United States because, like you, I love America. But our country's in trouble. And I've got the experience and the leadership and the ideas and the values and the results to lead it to a better place. And I want to talk to you about the way forward, but I first want to talk to you about how we got into this mess. And we got into this mess in large measure because we elected somebody as President of the United States who had no executive experience, was a professor at a college, had a cup of coffee long enough to be in the United States Senate and leave before it got cold. And then he went into the Oval Office, and we wonder why it's not working. And he also had the wrong ideas for this country. But our country is hurting. We got nearly $4 a gallon gas. We've got crushing levels of unemployment and so many of our fellow Americans not being able to get the job opportunities or the resources to take proper care of their families or their needs or to have their dreams fulfilled or realized. We have a nation that is drowning in debt with an out-of-control federal government. We have a president and a then Pelosi-Reed Congress that gave us an unconstitutional and misguided and unwise health care reform bill. We have a federal government now that tells private companies where they can and can't grow a business in the United States of America. The government telling private entities that they can't start a new business in a different state. Are you kidding me? These are measures, these are barometric measures of the federal government being out of control and it begin to stifle not just our economy, but the American spirit. And so last time when President Obama was campaigning for this office, he came through Iowa and he gave incredible speeches. He gave soaring speeches filled with this big rhetoric and fancy words and all the rest. And he duped the Democrats in this state into thinking he was the right person for the job and would be a great president. And Iowa launched him on his way. But now we've learned some tough lessons about what it means to put people in office who just give big speeches and don't have the experience and the results and the right compass settings to lead the nation properly. So when I started my campaign here in Iowa, in Des Moines, I had this theme. It's time to tell the truth. It's time to tell the truth about what the country's really facing by way of challenges. And it's time to tell the truth about the solutions that it's really going to take to fix it. And we need leaders who have the strength and the fortitude and the experience to actually get it done and not just talk about it. And so, as you might imagine, campaigning for in Iowa, you don't want to start with offending a lot of Iowans. But I said the hard truths are going to have to include some truths in Iowa. And that's why I came here and said, look, we'll gradually do it over time and give notice so people can prepare. But over time, we got to phase out the ethanol subsidies. Now, that's not an easy thing to say in Iowa. And I wasn't just picking on ethanol. If you look at the deep hole that we're in, we're not going to have to just cut billions out of the federal budget. We're going to have to cut trillions out of the federal budget. So we're going to have to look not just at the ethanol subsidies, but all of the subsidies and deal with them. Then I went down to Florida and said to seniors in the next generation, you know, here's what it's really going to take to fix Social Security. That's not an easy discussion in Florida either. We told the seniors, look, if you're on the program now, we won't touch you. With no change in your program or benefits. But for the next generation, there's going to have to be some changes. Then I went to Wall Street and told those Wall Street bankers, you get your snout out of the trough, the government trough, because you got it in there as deep and as bad as anybody in the country. And you need to get your nose out of the trough and quit looking for carve-outs, bailouts, handouts, special deals, and the like. Then I went to Washington, D.C. and told the public employee unions that you can't be getting better compensation and benefits than the people paying the bill, the taxpayers, and on down the list. So those are the kinds of truths that we're going to have to look each other in the eye and say that we're going to have to get done to save this country. It is drowning in debt. It is sinking in debt. So here's a few things that we need to do. Before we get to talk about cutting spending in detail, and I will cover that too, we got to talk about growing the economy. We've got to talk about getting the private sector once again not just feeling anemic or laggard or average. We want to have exceptional economic growth. And it's not about just some numbers. It's about providing the opportunities that every American needs to have a job, to take care of his or her family, or do the kinds of things that matter most to them, and to realize their American dream. We need to do those things that are going to inspire and encourage job growth, not discourage it. Or as I say in Minnesota, look, every politician comes through a room like this and talks about, I'm pro-jobs, I'm the pro-job mayor, I'm the pro-job member of Congress, I'm the pro-job legislator. But as it relates to the people on the other side of the aisle, you can't be pro-job and anti-business. That's like being pro-egg and anti-chicken. That doesn't work. And so we need to do those things that are going to make it more likely that businesses and jobs are going to start and grow in Iowa and in Minnesota and the rest of the country. And when you talk to business leaders, as I do every day across this country, they all say the same things. They say, Governor, get the government off my back. And some talk about taxes, and some talk about regulation, and some talk about healthcare costs, and some talk about energy costs, and some talk about litigation costs, and down the list. But the general message is you got to make the load lighter, not heavier. You got to do things to encourage me, not discourage me. And you should know there are 6 million businesses in the United States of America, approximately. 5.9 million of that 6 million has 500 employees or less. So the vast majority of our economy depends on early and new and small and mid-sized businesses. And they're saying President Obama, in his approach, is weighing me down and discouraging me to such a point that I just don't feel encouraged. Basically, the entrepreneurs of the country are on strike against the president. That's not a good place for America to be. So we went to the University of Chicago, gave the most detailed and aggressive and bold economic and job speech of any candidate in this race by far, including the president. If you're interested in the details, it's on timpawlenty.com, but here are the highlights. Take the corporate tax rate from one of the highest in the world to something that's more towards the most competitive in the world. In other words, from 35% to 15%. And then clean out as many of those exemptions and deductions and credits and special deals as possible so we have a flat, transparent, more pro-growth, more pro-investment tax code in this country. And the ability of our companies to compete should not be dependent upon their ability to go get some special deal or connection to Congress. Their ability to succeed should be dependent upon their ability to connect to customers in the private marketplace. And then we said take the individual tax code from 6 rates down to 2 and eliminate taxation on capital gains and estate taxes and interest and dividends. And then do the other hard work of getting this economy moving, which is to have an energy policy that has 3 words that describe it. More American energy. And then have the subtitle be all of the above. Have real health care reform, not Obama health care reform where the government takes it over, but do it the right way. Like I did in Minnesota, no individual mandates, no takeovers, getting market forces to work to control costs and improve health care, and then fixing regulations in this country. They are out of control. And we should have all regulations sunset so they don't go on forever, that they have to come up for renewal every 3 or 5 years. And then before any new regulations go into effect, they should come back to Congress so real people have to can connect to their elected representatives one more time before they become finalized so that they're accountable on an up or down vote for these regulations and on down the list. Now look, every candidate on the Republican side is going to come through town and say basically the same things. They're all going to say, look, I'm for cutting taxes, I'm for reducing spending, I'm for education reform that focuses on empowering parents, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-traditional marriage, I'm pro-public employee compensation reform, I'm for health care reform that's in the private market, not the government, and down the list. So you might hear that and say, gosh, they all sound the same. Well, what's the difference between these candidates? Well, here's a couple differences that I hope you'll focus on. One is, I've actually done this stuff. There's a big difference that as we learned with Barack Obama, between flapping your jaw and giving speeches or offering failed amendments in Congress and leading as an executive a large enterprise under difficult circumstances with a public component and driving it to results and conclusion. I've done it. And not just talked about it, I've done it. I took Minnesota, one of the most challenging political environments in the country, and its spending from historic highs to historic lows. We were one of the first states in the nation to offer statewide performance pay for teachers instead of seniority pay. We did public employee compensation reform in Minnesota big time before it was cool and popular to do. We did health care reform, as I mentioned, the right way. We did tort reform, or litigation and lawsuit abuse reform, and welfare reform, and immigration reform. So I'm not just up here flapping my jaw. I did it. We put a majority of conservatives on the Minnesota Supreme Court for the first time in the modern history of the state, maybe the entire history of the state. So that's one big difference. We go driving around Iowa with this RV that says road to results. And we're done, I'm done with the speeches and the usual jaw flapping from politicians. We want to get the job done for the country and the people of America. I have. Most of the other candidates haven't. Number 2, you have to understand people if you want to be President of the United States. I think you want to know where they came from. I think you want to know what they believe, why they believe it. I think you want to know how that shaped their values and their thinking. I think you want to know what does that inform you as it relates to what kind of person they are in terms of their words and their deeds matching up. I grew up in a meatpacking town. It was South St. Paul, Minnesota. Back in the day, it was the home of the world's largest stockyards. 6, 7-story meat processing plants, some of the largest in the world, surrounded by the world's largest stockyards. My dad, for much of his life, was a truck driver. My mom was a homemaker much of her life. She died when I was 16 years old of ovarian cancer. My dad, not too much longer after that, lost his job for a while. So as a very young person, I saw the face of a community and neighborhoods and families, including my own, going through a big economic challenges and change. And when you're a young person like that and your mom passes on and your dad's unemployed, you get to make some decisions about who you are and what you believe at a very early age. So in those moments, I leaned into my faith. I leaned into my loving family who rallied around in a difficult circumstance. I got some lucky breaks and a lot of help. One day the phone rang, and it was a guy who was the produce manager of the local grocery store. And he said, I heard about the plight of your family. You show up down here Saturday morning at 6 a.m., you got yourself a job. I worked at that grocery store for the next 7 years, unloading trucks and putting produce up on the rack and trying to make it look as well as possible, but it helped me get through high school and college and part of law school. I was very grateful, but I learned the value of a job. I learned the value of what that means to the stability and confidence of families and people. So this is not some theory for me, it's not some chart, it's not some graph, it's not some numbers. I've lived the American dream. And so I understand the power of it because I've lived it. When my mom was dying, not too many days before she passed on, she called my brothers and sisters into the hospital room. She made them look her in the eye and say, she knew that her days were numbered. And she said, I want you to promise me that you'll do everything you can to get him to college. I was the first one in my family that was able to go to college. Not because my brothers and sisters lacked the capacity, they just didn't have the opportunity. I'm very grateful for that and the value of education and what that means for people's ability to access the economy of today and tomorrow. So those are some of the lessons I learned along the way, and they reflect not just my walk, but a belief and an understanding of the American story, the American dream, not as a book, not as a theory, but as the stuff of life. And I've got my fingernails dirty in a lot of circumstances, and I think you want a candidate who connects not just up here, but here. And we're going to need that if we're going to win the election. And lastly, on the political front, Iowa's got this deserved and wonderful position of being first. But I also think you want to be right. You want to pick somebody and launch somebody out of here who is not just good for Iowa in that moment, but you want to make sure that person can actually be the nominee of our party, can actually beat Barack Obama, and can actually lead and function and serve as President of the United States under the most challenging circumstances in the modern history of the country and get good results. So the first step in that journey is to make sure we have a united party. Our party, as you know, in the conservative movement consists of economic conservatives, social conservatives, Tea Party libertarian types, and a few others. If you think about most of the rest of the leading candidates, they primarily appeal to one of those buckets or one and a half of those buckets, but not all of them. And I've got the ability authentically and genuinely to unite and appeal to that whole continuum. Many of the other candidates can't say the same thing. So if we're going to get this party united, we've got to start with that. And then number two, we got to have a candidate who can go into blue and purple places in the final states that are going to decide the election, like Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Ohio, Pennsylvania, places like that, and win. Everybody's going to say they can, but I've actually done it. I got elected and re-elected in one of the most difficult political environments as a movement conservative in the country. And one of those years, 2006, was one of the most difficult political years for Republicans in the country. So I'll leave it at that, but I want to just encourage you to join our team. Ames is coming up fast. It's just 3 weeks away or so. That's going to be a benchmark for campaigns as to how they're doing. We're going to need to show momentum, and we are going to show momentum at that. And your involvement, your help, your support at Ames would make a huge difference. And so if you haven't signed up on the website, we hope that you'll sign one of these cards before you go. We'll take care of all the logistics. We can get you there, get the tickets, and take good care of you on that day. But we need your support. It'll make a big difference, not just to Iowa, but we need to also make sure that it'll make a big difference for the country. So I'm grateful for your time here this afternoon, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks for coming.